So
Good afternoon.
I think we have. Oh, I just saw Dr. Yarbrough, but now I don't. Maybe he's having connection issues. All right. So it looks like the committee's here and Ms. Hannon's. Okay. Looks like we got a lot of. I think we have critical mass. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome to another fabulous Finance and Operations Committee meeting. The first thing is just a notification. I received word ahead of time that there's a request to move up the financial report, the monthly financial report, to the top of the meeting because staff have to testify with the Board of Alders or a meeting with, I don't know if it's the Board of Alders or a subcommittee of the Board of Alders. So we will move that item up to the top before the action items unless there's an objection from the committee. And then I also heard that two items are being withdrawn to finalize some details on them. And that's item 3.2 and 4.3. Is that correct, Ms. DeMayo? Okay. So those are a couple little agenda changes. So let's go ahead and we'll move up the monthly financial report. So Ms. Hannon's and crew, it's all yours.
Okay.
And right now we're looking at email.
Christine, oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to give the presentation for the period October 31st, 2024, and we're just going to provide the financial report as they are to date. And as you can see here, this is our strategic operating plan for 2024 to 2029. And following with that, we make sure that we provide adequate monthly financial reports that are clearly transparent. So the reports that we're doing tonight will be the general funds as of October 31st, the quarterly general fund projection report as of October 31st, and then the monthly financial report for special funds as of October 31st as well. So the total expenditures for everything combined are $56.7 million. General fund is 34.9, and the special funds are 21.8, or 34%. So now we'll go into the financial report for general fund. And of course, we have the how to read the financial report, which we always put in into our reports. And that's part of our transparency so that folks can know what they are looking at and what the columns mean. And here we have the general fund report as of October 31st, where we spent to date and bear with me for the numbers, 34.9 to date. And we still have, and we have monthly encumbrances already of 92.6. And then we have our full year expenditure forecast, and then we have our full year variance. Now, please just keep in mind that these are numbers that we just came out with in terms of putting everything together, comparing what we had when we presented the presented the budget and what we are looking at now, numbers that have changed. So the shaded columns, I just want to make clear that this is what we know currently. We still have adjustments to be made once supplemental funding, pending contract negotiations, special education costs, and any other things that coming down the pipe are finalized. Part of our meeting tonight is to talk about additional funding for grants, but I don't want to talk too much about those until those come to fruition. With the general fund, these are the numbers the way they are now with the available budgets, the account descriptions. These numbers too are subject to change because as we get additional funds and or other adjustments, we will be adjusting these columns as well so that the adjusted budget is more in line with what we actually have and with all of our revenue sources included. You can just keep rolling. Okay, with the special funds financial report, it's October 31st. So far to date, we have 63.8 as a budget. And these are grants that have actually come in. Our actual expenditures to date are 21.8. We have encumbered 19.5. And we have a balance of 22. So that's to date, we've spent 34% rounded off of the special funds grants. And again, we try to make sure that our reports are transparent. So this is how you read the financial reports. And then a summary of the grants revenue. So you can see 23-24, we had $144 million. We were able to roll over 21.6. We received thus far 41.3, and we still have quite a few. We have 40.6 in pending approval. So our anticipated funding for anticipated new funding comes in at 81.9, and the two together they come to 103. You can see that's a stark difference from what it was last fiscal year. So now you can see all the reds where the grants are actually, these are grants that have expired and or have not been renewed. And here is the financial report, which just shows it in a pie chart. Some people like to see colors and numbers. So what we did here was we just put it in a pie chart to show where the funds are being spent. And this is just like, say, look at a glance. And that's all for this financial report. So I will take any questions that anyone may have.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions from the committee? So a question that I had was on the projected budget deficit. My understanding from previous years is this is very preliminary numbers.
Correct.
At this time of year.
Right. And the numbers too are showing things that have not, like we put a few things out there that did not materialize. So I just want to make sure that we're all looking at where we are now so that we know what we're looking at. We look at the budgets like just about every day. We make adjustments, but this is like a snapshot in time. Remembering that, there were some contracts that were still out, transportation was still out, special ed, there were a lot of moving targets there as well. And so what we had to do this year was we had to go in and put in now that we have a better handle on the salaries in terms of what folks are actually making as opposed to trying to project what they're making. We now have actual numbers out there. So that's what we're trying to do on a monthly basis to keep this as a rolling document. And there are a few adjustments that we do have to go in and make, but I'd like to see the document or the check in hand before I actually go in and put in a number that doesn't materialize.
And my second question related to this is, so that this is the projected budget deficit. This is where things are now in kind of an austerity mode. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is just was at the Citywide Building Stewardship Committee meeting last Thursday. And when we see the report of all the building related projects happening, there is a large amount of work that's on hold because there's not funds available, either capital funds or operating funds for some of these facilities work that needs to be done. So I just wanted to confirm that my assumption is correct, that this is what stuff we have to do, but there still is a large amount of other stuff on hold while facilities folks are trying to identify the funding to do those projects.
Correct. Correct.
So it's the stuff that's going to be they have to do this year, but there still is a lot of known needs that are not being met with that deficit. So
Correct.
is that okay?
Yes, correct. And we are, like I said, this is a moving target, so we are making adjustments as we get approvals for items. We then will go in and start making the necessary adjustments.
Okay. All right. All right, I think those are my questions. So just confirm, are there any other comments or questions from the committee?
None from me. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
We will continue on with the agenda. The first one of next items are in the action items, or just the information only ones. Are there any comments or questions related to the four information only items?
A question that our limit for that is 25,000 or 20,000. It's not 10, correct?
Our current limit for this is 20.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's 20, and we'll talk about it later. There's a proposal in the purchasing policy to raise that a little bit, but it's a 20. Dr. Negron?
Yes, well, we are in the information only segment. I just wanted to make you aware that we did have an emergency over at Edgewood. So there will be, we had to execute an emergency PO for $5,230 with Northeast Pumps. And that was to make sure that we could get properly running main heat circular pump so that we could get heat to Edgewood. It is a work in progress. It's literally like happening as I speak. Grateful for the weather we had today. Grateful for the forecast for tomorrow, which means we'll still be able to keep the kids at Edgewood while the repairs are happening. But again, we are looking at it day by day. So there wasn't time to get the paperwork in by the time we posted for F&O, but it will definitely be there by the time we go into post for the Board of Ed meeting.
All right, so that information will be posted with the other information only items for the full board meeting.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions related to information only? We will move into agreements, the first one of which is an agreement with Nurses for Daycare, LLC. Ms. Derwin. You're muted.
This is an agreement with a Nurses for Daycare company to provide hearing and vision screenings required by the Head Start performance standards for our Head Start students, as well as referrals and input of data into the COPA system.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I received some questions, so I'll just ask them now. So Head Start, there were some Head Start nursing related staff that were laid off or in the process of being laid off. And so now it appears we're bringing in a contractor to do the same work. So can you explain how this relates to that?
Yes, it does relate to that, but the nurses that were let go was a part-time LPN and a part-time CNN who are not part of a collective bargaining unit, and they are at-will employees. And as many people are aware that there was restructuring going on within the early childhood department. And we are still in the process of hiring and completing that restructuring program. So this was an attempt to get the information required by the Head Start performance standards completed, and to get information into the computer. We do have a nurse at the Dr. Mayo building who is a Head Start nurse and splits her time between the Head Start students and the students with special needs. And she is able to do some of this work, but not the entire volume, and does not travel to the other 6 satellite sites.
All right, thank you for that. And can you talk about what are the implications if we do not complete these? I'm looking at this. These are vision and hearing screenings. What happens if we don't complete the vision and hearing screenings and get the information entered into the proper system?
I mean, we can definitely be cited for this. Truthfully, the mandate is within 45 days, and we have significant gaps within the program based on the restructuring and the current personnel. I mean, we're working to get things in, but obviously, I don't have the skill level to do hearing and vision screening.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions related to this?
I guess one other thing I would add is this is a short-term fix, not a long-term fix. Once the correct people are in place, there would not be the need for this in the future.
Okay. But that said, the contract will run from the end of November through June 30. So, I mean, so you're saying you're not anticipating you'll be in need of using this, like later in this fiscal year, or?
I would assume the work will be done prior to the end date, but just to ensure that we had the capability of any of the data input for the remainder of the school year, it was done in that manner. What I'm referring to is this is the alternative to hiring a person that the district or program would be responsible for continued employment.
Okay. Thank you. Hearing nothing else on this, agreement 3.2 was withdrawn, so 3.3 is an agreement with American Education Solutions. Ms. Bonanno?
Yes, this is the evaluation for the new MSAP grant that the district competed for and won. So what you see here is the current time, so November through June 30th portion of the year 1 evaluation. As you know, the federal fiscal year goes from October 1st through September 30th. So the second half of the services will come July 1st and go through October 1st for the remainder of year 1. And so this is with American Evaluation Services. You may recall that when we competed for the grant, we did an RFP for a grant writer and someone to write the evaluation design. And American Evaluation Services was our vendor for that and will continue to be the evaluator as they were selected through the RFP process earlier on.
Great, thank you. Comments or questions?
Yes, thank you for presenting this. What has the change in cost been for this particular vendor? I think the notes listed that we've used them for the past 20 years, let's say.
So we have had a longstanding relationship, but we actually haven't had a grant since 2017. And so this is not a continuation year over year. It will be next year as we get into year 2 of the grant. And so in cost, since I can recall from the last grant, has not increased significantly for the entire project. I think it was just around the same amount of money for the 5 years that we had it in 2017 as well, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Hearing nothing else, we'll move on to 3.4, which is an agreement with Arte. Mr. Tabaris, looks like you're up.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Thaddeus, but yes, I'm presenting the contract for Arte to support 100 sessions of after school extended school hour programming with for students within our district. Of those 100 sessions, 80 of those will be split up amongst 4 sites for after school programming, and 20 of those sessions will support Saturday Academy initiatives at the Atwater Senior Center for students to participate in. So some of those programming efforts will include arts and crafts, projects, cultural dance, sports instruction, and language arts and various other games to keep those students and families engaged.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions?
Yes, thank you for the presentation and documentation. Per session for the after school program, what's the goal in terms of the number of students? I think I saw the information for the Saturday sessions.
Yes, pull this up just to give you an accurate number. And for the after school sessions, they usually take on 20 to 25 students per class.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
All right, thank you. Next item is 3.5, an agreement with Equity Enrichment Alliance. Ms. Strand?
Hi. So I am excited to be presenting this plan for high school in the community to work with Equity Enrichment Alliance. We are going to be working on their life skills, their life program, which is L is life skills, I is interpersonal development, F is future planning, and E is emotional intelligence. So they're going to be providing support around FAFSA applications, college applications, preparing for career life beyond HSC, but also helping out with student social emotional regulation, pushing into some of our classes, especially freshman and senior seminar, and helping students develop those skills and teachers provide support. This is particularly important to us having no longer having the Alive program in our school, that we need something that is, and also being down to a part-time intern, as our a part-time intern as our school counselor while our regular school counselor is out on maternity leave. So this fills a number of gaps in our programming and should be really helpful.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions?
Yes, just a comment. Thank you for securing this in terms of the gap and also just in terms of the ongoing need as it relates to employment and higher education. I know students from the high schools, from the councils have expressed ongoing interest in SEL and soft skills. So thank you very much. It definitely is important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to 3.6, an agreement with Insight Coaching, also Ms. Strand.
That is also me. So Insight Coaching is run by Ariel Sprotzer, and we've worked with her before. She used to be with Grade School Partnerships. She's branched off on her own. She will be working with us around our professional development. She has an incredibly strong background in data. So as we move into the district initiative around DataWise, she's going to be really helpful for that work. She also has an incredible expertise in project-based learning and mastery-based learning, so she can help with our regular professional learning meetings. She also pushes into classrooms, works directly with teachers, helps them strengthen their instructional practice, try out new methodology, and assess the effectiveness of that work. Provides a second set of eyes, sometimes also can do some co-teaching. And she's an amazing thought partner to me. She's somebody I can be completely honest and frank with, who can do the same in return to help me strengthen my own practice.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
And, we'll go on to amendments. The first one of which is an amendment to the agreement with ALK Mindfulness. So, Mr. Tabaris?
Yes, so over at John Martinez, ALK Mindfulness is already supporting students K through 5, and with the discussion of the site, they wanted to expand their services to support the middle school population at 6 through 8. So to continue the current programming efforts that are going on at John Martinez, we're able to expand their contract to support that 6 through 8 population at John Martinez.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? One quick comment is, if we could, when these get listed for the full board meeting, Ms. DeMayo, the percent increase for amendments as well as purchase orders or change orders. So this one is about a 9% by my math. But if we could just, we've had requests from the board that we have that information there, just so people see how much things are going up. So thank you. So we'll go on to an agreement to the amendment to the agreement with Autism Health and Fitness Center. Ms. Jackson?
Yep, this is actually a increase due to an increase in service. So the amendment is for us to support another classroom. Again, Autism Health and Fitness provides adaptive physical health to our students in our specialized classrooms.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Hearing none, this is also, I think, by my math, also around a 9%-ish increase. So
Yep.
is it additional services?
Yep, for the actual service, not the increase in cost.
Got it. All right, 4.3 was withdrawn. So purchase order 5.1 is with ServPro Newington. Mr. Sterling.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Good evening. This is a request for purchase order for ServPro of Newington to perform cleaning of all surfaces and HVAC ductwork in the Edgewood Avenue School cafeteria for an amount not to exceed $31,455. The procurement method was by quotation, so we got requested 3 quotes from 3 vendors. ServPro came in the lowest. They are also the only vendor that has the A&M insurance that we require, and therefore bringing it for the board here, Finance and Operations Committee here, for approval to move forward with this project.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you for presenting this. I do support it. It seemed like the work to be done involves the cafeteria and the band room. I just have a general question. Is it a ventilation topic as it relates to the instruments where we need increased ventilation in those rooms, or is it something different?
For the band room, we're finding in a lot of locations that the band rooms have storage of the equipment in closets, or sometimes that space, the HVAC may not be working well enough to reduce the humidity, especially during the summertime and into the fall months when there's high humidity, especially this particular year. So we're looking at all those locations where we have those problems. If we cannot fix the HVAC right now, we are installing dehumidifiers temporarily until we can get the HVAC. If it's a larger project, we can get the funding sourced to get that problem resolved.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hearing nothing else on that, that's the end of the action items. I'll go ahead and make a motion. And that is, I move that we send to the full board with a recommendation to approve the 5 agreements because 3.2 was withdrawn, and the 2 amendments because 4.3 was withdrawn, and 1 purchase order.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The motion passes. So we'll move into our reports and updates section. We've already heard our financial report. Is there a capital budget update? That might be something we want at our next meeting because there might be some outcome in terms of the Board of Alders actions that'll have some effect on capital funds. So if we could move this to next month, please, Ms. DeMayo. And the goal of this is we often hear about the operating budgets and so on, but it'd be good to get a sense of some of the capital projects. And I think for this, it would be good to kind of get a sense of kind of the backlog of known projects, which are represented on the all the stopped projects in the citywide building and stewardship. I think for our purposes, unless the committee disagrees, that ballpark figures rather than to the penny figures, since they're projections on work that's been stopped, which means that when it comes time to actually do it, we might see cost increases due to parts and tariffs or whatever. Who knows when we finally get funds to do this. Mr. Aline?
Yes, Mr. Wilcox, just to make sure I understand the ask, we're looking for a capital project financial dollar amount kind of projection for the capital projects that are future projects and also current projects. Is that what you're looking for?
I think so. I don't think we've had a view of the capital budget for the district. Not lately, if we've ever have. So it's talked about in pieces, but kind of in one place to kind of get a sense of these are some of these big projects that are happening. So similar to how we can see things with the operating budget, just kind of getting a sense of where things are going.
All right, and you're looking for facilities projects or all operations projects?
Well, specifically capital, which most of the capital budget would be facilities related. Am I incorrect? Facilities and construction.
There are other departments. Yeah, there's other operations departments that have capital budgets, IT, so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure that I understand what is it you want. Is it specific to facilities, or are you looking for an overall capital operations report, which would be more of something that I'll have to work with Mike Carter and the other directors on?
And other committee members can chime in here as well. I think my purpose is just to kind of get a handle on the broad outlines of what the capital budget is. I couldn't tell you right at this moment how much capital funds. When I'm looking at capital funds, we're seeing things that are projects that are allocated to capital fund accounts as opposed to an overall big picture. Whereas we have with, I think a good guidance might be Ms. Hannon's, where she's giving us a view of the outlay in her financial report for different categories and allocations, just trying to get a sense of that. So it's her page. She has her big picture items, and then she has a page with some detail, like this is transportation, this is special education, this is instruction costs, this is, just something that's in kind of in these big categories. This is construction related. I'm trying to think of other capital budget vehicles, those kinds of things. Dr. Negron?
Yes, as you mentioned earlier, I think once we go through this process tonight, right, and we hear back, I think we can definitely give you, for example, if we were to get that $5.5 million, we do have already an idea of where that would go into major projects. And we would be able to break it down that way to tell you whether it's an HVAC, whether it's the roofing, whether it be flooring or anything like that, and the individual buildings that we are considering. So I believe I have a sense of what it is that you're looking for. But again, once we go through this process, we can definitely bring you the full scope of where that's going to go. And I think we can also show you with the limited amount of dollars that have been set aside for capital, we should be able to also tell you what has been able to get accomplished.
So I think that sounds good as far as my thinking is. Sitting behind all this is the fact that we're going to need to be putting in capital budget requests for the upcoming city's biennial capital budget. And so, I think it's good for us to be able to kind of get a sense of the types of things that are in that type of budget. Because if you're not paying attention, it's just account numbers is what we're seeing. So we can see, we can look down the list, the things that are charged against capital project accounts and other things. So presumably that's capital funds, but not getting a good big picture. And then I also think having at least the beginnings of what these deficits are, which for me is represented in a sea of yellow boxes that is the color coding on the citywide building and stewardship of things that are on hold because of funds, trying to identify funds. So those are known projects. In some cases, maybe known projects where the engineering work has already been done to specify like what a roof would be, and then having a sense of where this stuff's going to go. I think depending on the capital budget or the capital funds allocated potentially by Board of Alders, having a good sense there that these are the projects ready to go that will now be able to happen would be good for us to look at. I don't know if others on the committee have any thoughts on this.
Yes, I agree with what's presented. And to follow up, Dr. DeGrone, on what you mentioned, I was thinking of some reflection of the priorities or the strategy for spend. So for instance, if $1 million came in, where would we put that first? Or what would be the next projects? If 2 million, 5 million comes in, what will we do? And I imagine the approach may change based on the amount that's allocated. But any kind of reflection on what might be the plan of attack, and it may not be possible to suggest timeline, but maybe priority will give some indication. I know sometimes from the questions we get, it's not clear if there is a remembrance or acknowledgement of certain work to be done. But if that work is put on a list and we know, well, yes, it's there, and here is where it falls in the queue, or just the fact that it's there is an acknowledgement that we are keeping track of these items, and we do intend to address them as resources become available within certain timelines. So that might be useful as a first draft in terms of priorities or strategy.
Happy to answer any questions offline if once you all think about this more. I don't want to create a lot of work for people needlessly, but I do think we need to, the things that we've been talking about tonight, we need to start to take a look at it. I'm also not expecting this, and personally, I'm not expecting this to be definitive, the perfect view, but it's, here's our first pass at this because, the information we've been receiving from Ms. Hannons, for instance, on other parts of the budget, that's a well formatted thing that's developed over years that, and this is something that's relatively new for us to be talking about. Kind of.
And Mr. Wilcox.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add that I also think maybe what becomes a priority might change based on what is the value being upheld. So if I don't know, but I imagine there might be a number of smaller cost repairs that could make a huge difference in terms of morale or school culture or district culture. And it may be more attractive if we had a large sum of money come in to attack the larger cost items, but it may be the case that there are a number of much smaller items that can be quickly, maybe not quickly, but fixed with the influx of money. So if there is some type of prioritization or strategy that is offered as a draft thought, I would be interested in knowing what are the thoughts around putting one particular item above or ahead of another item as resources come in. I was glad to see kind of the mold remediation as it relates to the band room and other things. It's a relatively smaller cost item compared to other things that we pay for, but it should have a big impact in terms of just quality of school experience and perception.
Agree with all that. And then also that if it is easier as the first pass is to take a look at, what's actually allocated for this year and the plans are. That might be a good first place to start, along with whatever the new projects that might be able to be funded if the alders infuse some extra funds into the to help repair some of our buildings. Pretty much all of them, I'm sure, need some level of repair based on our deficits and inequitable school funding in Connecticut. Hearing nothing else on this.
I think Dr. DeGrone re-raised her hand.
I'm sorry, Dr. Negro. I thought it was up from previous.
Thank you. No, it was just that Dr. Yarborough's comment made me think also of the importance of also reiterating so that the public understands what types of items actually meet criteria under capital as opposed to like operating budget. Because I know I'm very grateful for Mr. Carter, who continues to build my capacity in that area.
Yes, that would be key understanding for the public and for this board member here. So, yes.
I agree, especially because if you don't deal with operating funds and capital funds, which can be different in different workplaces as to what qualifies for one or another, it's good to kind of have that overview of what it is for the school district and for the city of New Haven, what constitutes a capital expenditure versus an operating expenditure, which I think in the end really has to deal with bond ratings also, is where it gets to be really important. Okay, so hearing nothing else on this, next item is the discussion calendar, just to kind of put that out there. It's on our agenda every month. Things coming up for the, wow, we have one more meeting scheduled for 2024. Our December 2nd meeting. We'll see if we can actually get through the month of December with only one meeting, but in addition to this capital budget things we've been talking about, we'll be looking at our meeting dates for 2025. And then also the overview of the FY25. I'm sorry, it says FY25 should be the FY25-26 budget process. So a view of that, it would be nice if we knew what the major dates were, or what the process is going to be, particularly if it's different than previous year's processes. So we can just kind of have an overview of goals are for that and ballpark on the dates, if the dates are available, or if nothing else in previous calendars we've looked at had just, dates to be announced for things like public forums and things like that. I would recommend, as part of this process, adding in some extra, like a public workshop or something related to this, because in addition to the budget seeking funds from the city, this is also the state's biennial budget process will be starting up in January. So it helps inform members of the public, members of our bargaining units, and other supporters in seeking funds from Hartford as well as from New Haven. And I don't know that we've had a public budget forum, like a workshop kind of thing. We've had overviews presented to the public, but something that allows the public to weigh in on some of these maybe earlier in the process. It also helps inform people just the difficulties of what we're dealing with. Yes, Dr. Negron.
Just wanted to add, I think like last year, I know we had a few meetings related to the budget. I know that we have one in person, which we held over at the Cross Atrium. And then we also did one virtually. So I know that Linda and the team are getting ready to release our timeline. Of course, we do want to create more opportunities to just continue to talk about needs and the plan forward.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
All
Wilcox?
right. Dr. Yarborough, you had something else?
Yes, thank you. Um, uh, Two topics that I'm thinking of. One is transportation, and the other topic is the climate resolution. And I think we passed transportation in terms of update on it for the calendar. And I know there was some, I think, contract or legal things to work out. But I recognize that's a big cost item. There was electrification somewhere in the discussion, and I would be looking for an update as to where we are or what's being worked on. And I guess my concern is that time is passing, and I don't know if we have additional steps we need to take as it relates to a timeline. And then for the climate resolution piece, uh, just understanding where the district is or what our plan is to get more information on that. I do recognize the lead for that is not present, or the past lead for both of those is not present.
So in the past, we've had climate-specific updates from facilities. I think we've tended to have done those in April, but we could move that up. But also, yeah, the electric bus project, that was things that the district, I think the board voted on that last December or early January for seeking funds through First Student for bus electrification from EPA. I don't know if there's updates on that. So,
Mr. Wilcox, there will be an update in January when the awards will be made.
okay. So, Ms. DeMayo, if we could, just on the January 21st, we could just have a placeholder for transportation climate update or electrification update.
Yeah, by the way, we applied for 50 electric buses at approximately 350,000 apiece.
Okay.
Wonderful.
All right. Hearing nothing else on scheduling, we'll move on to policies, procurement policy. There was a fresh, clean draft posted. And I think we're close or we're there. So Ms. DeMayo and maybe Attorney Alexiadis or anybody else who needs to speak on this, please take it away.
Mr. Wilcox, before Pat DeMayo and Attorney Alexiadis speak, I just wanted to take a moment just once again to reiterate how grateful we are for the enormous amount of time and thought that has gone into updating this policy. So this, there was a team made up of representatives here from the Board of Ed, primarily from the Finance Department, but including others, as well as key members from the city, like the Controller and the Corp Council. So again, I just wanted to highlight that. A lot of work went into it with a lot of thought. I know at times, people got a little frustrated, like, where are you? But again, we wanted to make sure that all eyes were on it, that we were considering all the pieces, and we are very happy to share the update today. So with that, I'm gonna leave it up to Pat and Attorney Alexiadis. Thank you both.
Okay. Last week, Attorney Alexiadis, Melinda Figueroa from City Purchasing, and we met and we hammered through in about 5 hours the almost final draft of the policy. Overall, it meets the city's purchasing policy and the charter. There were some changes that we made. One of them is that we did recommend changing the superintendent's authority from 20 to 25. We also removed a requirement that we had on the board side for a quick bid form for 5,000 and below. The city does not acknowledge that form or need it, and state grants, federal grants do not require it. So we recommend eliminating that. And the one section that we added, different from in the past, is related to educational exceptions. And every year, the staff of the district will present to the board a list of educational exceptions related to the state identifying certain curriculum or services or support that they are requiring districts to utilize. Also, under special education, where we have shortage areas and cannot go out to RFP necessarily for those services. So that is something the board would then annually approve, and we would notate it when sending our documentation through to the city, that these are educational exceptions. And those are really the major. I think there's a little, Attorney Alexiadis, did you have some fine tuning you wanted to add in there?
Every time I look at the document, I find things that need to be, typos and internal inconsistencies that need to be corrected, and I'm sure that that we will continue to do that. But I'm really just here to answer any questions and receive feedback. This has had input from many people. And what we're trying to do is reconcile and have a policy that's consistent with city purchasing procedures and state law, city charter, city ordinance. And Pat mentioned the educational issue, which is basically the city can't, and the city purchasing department can't mandate or pass judgment on curriculum issues, things like that, things that are purely educational. And so there's a carve out for that, but yet the money still needs to be allocated and spent. So we think that this will bring clarity going forward, but we are welcome for any additional input from the committee members, or from staff for that matter. My question is, where does it go from here? Does it go to governance or just straight to the board today?
All policies get worked out in the various committees, and then they go to governance for final review.
Okay.
And from there it would go to the board. So, a goal would be to send to governance something that is substantially completed, particularly something like this where there's been so many people having input from various different city agencies and so on. So the next step from here would be to go to governance. The only question is, does it go to governance? Do we vote to send it there today, or do we vote to send it there on December 2nd? So that's because it sounds, from my understanding, from my reading of it, from the discussion so far tonight, is we're 98, 99% there. So
I think that's correct.
Okay. I had a few comments, but see if anybody else in the committee had comments they wanted or questions first.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to everyone on the team for working on this. And to think that 5 hours is hammering away really kind of elevates the scope of what this work is. So thank you for it. A couple of topics that have come up before, and as I reread this, want to get your take on it. The change order topic and process. Any changes or adjustments from what we currently have in place?
What we have, the document you're looking at really just incorporates the city procedures for change orders. But there's I think there's often confusion about what's a change order and what's an amendment. And the change orders really just apply to things that have gone out to a formal bid process. There's somebody who has gone through an RFP process and or other purchasing procedures exceeds their budget, then this committee will typically consider and the board will typically consider an amendment rather than a change order. I don't know if that answers your. Hopefully, that answers your question.
Yes, so that helps to begin to answer the question. And so then there was a comment about what happens, like previously, comments about what happens when.
Could I just interrupt real quick before you move off the subject of change orders? The biggest change is the new policy specifically talks about change orders. The previous policy did not specifically talk about change orders. So that's new language to address those issues. And I just confirmed this, went to the existing policy posted on our website, and it didn't specifically talk about that. So we've talked in the past, it's where we say, well, we got to follow the city's policies. And so now it specifically talks about, there's a section on change orders on page 3 of the new policy.
Okay, that helps. And so that's the new addition about the 20% as it relates to change orders. Thank you. The other question I have relates to items that qualify as information only items. Is it the case that the superintendent selects which qualifying items appear on that list, or is it everything that is under 25,000 automatically appears on that list?
My view would be, so number one, if it's under 25,000, that's the superintendent's authority, and it may appear on the report as information only. That does not prohibit superintendent or other from seeking approval on items that are below that threshold. But that's the maximum allowable limit.
Okay, thank you very much.
By the way, I'm sorry. We have seen in the past that whatever that limit is, we have seen items submitted to this committee and to the board for approval that are below the threshold.
Okay,
that would not be prohibited by this policy.
Okay, yes, that's what I was wondering. Thank you. Yeah, I think those were my main questions that came up. Thanks for everyone's work.
So, yes, and if I can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. DeMayo, it's so currently now the superintendent has the authority under our current policy for up to $20,000, and that's also interpreted as cumulative amount, so that if there was an agreement that was for $19,000 and she approved it, and there was another agreement for $19,000, an amendment to that agreement, that would bring it up over that threshold. Exactly. And so the amendment would be coming through because it's now over the threshold. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. It would move over to board approval at that point because it would exceed the superintendent's authority.
Okay. So now I'm wondering what it specifically says in this policy draft, if that spells that out. My one question is, there was a change from previous, and I think I understand it, but I just wanted to confirm it, and it's talking about when the superintendent has authority to go deviate from this policy, and there's some narrow places. I think the language previously said something about like as an emergency situation. if there was something that, heat out in a building and we needed something like a thing was mentioned, a part, something to make something work, and we didn't have an existing contract in place, she could have some authority under the current policy to do that, and would have to notify the board president as soon as reasonable and notify the board, full board at the next full board meeting. And have to justify it. But I think the word emergency came out, and it says if in the current draft, it was emergency is not there, but it says, authority, as long as it's under the authorities in the policy or in city purchasing policies. So we wouldn't be able to have an emergency $20 million contract come through, because that would not be allowed under city policies. But I just wanted to ask about the removal of the word emergency and if that's necessary.
I see that word in the posted copy that I'm looking at right now, and on the top of page 5.
Okay.
And so the exceptions are emergencies, and then there are city policies and procedures in place for emergencies, emergency purchasing. So there's emergencies or sole source, or purchasing cooperative state contracts.
And that's in the section allowing for non-competitive negotiations, but the way I'm reading it now, you could have a situation where currently for non-competitive negotiations, the district can using a sole source approval from the City of New Haven purchasing agent. But that still means it still goes through this committee and it still is approved by the board, the superintendent. The district is allowed to do that kind of purchasing, but it's also still approved. So this is the cases where the superintendent can do something outside of her spending authority in a situation. So before it was like connected to an emergency situation. I think the intention was, you have a geyser of water someplace or some novel situation that we don't have a contract in place for already, and things have to get done. So I'm just wondering about that change. I see what you're saying. It does talk about that emergency exists, which is one of the allowable things for non-competitive negotiations.
We could return the word emergency to that section if that would provide clarity or won't raise. We don't want to raise questions that are problematic for people.
Yeah, I hate to wordsmith in a meeting like this, but I'm also wondering if we can move towards approval today, which would send it to governance. So
The next meeting, just to let you know, Mr. Wilcox, is the 26th for governance.
okay, so this committee does not meet before that meeting. So,
on my end, I support we move this forward to governance, or at least review by other board members, because I think people are going to have questions and comments, and it's probably better that we start receiving those questions and comments in an unpressured timeline.
So I'm in the goal of, that's my goal as well. So I'm just wondering I think I'm perfectly happy to do that if we return the word emergency, and the sentence I'm looking at starts at the bottom of page 1 and goes on to page 2. Requirements of this policy may be waived by the superintendent if allowable under this policy and consistent with City of New Haven policies. I'm just wondering about a parenthetical or a statement that says, such as in the case of a true emergency,
We can add that. We can add that.
which would kind of gives the spirit of what we're talking about is not because it's expedient, it's because it's truly necessary.
Yeah, there were there were drafts and there were that that we took out a lot of draft language that had worked its way in here that just didn't apply and gave and really gutted some of these policies by allowing waivers that weren't appropriate. And so we've to try. I'm going to try very hard to tighten that up. So I mean, I'm happy to put that back in there if that would be helpful.
Okay. I think that'd be good because this is a relatively new section because we added something about this early on, which was also, I mean, the key part was the superintendent can do things in certain situations, but must notify to make it clear that that's what's going to happen. So I think if we could just add that statement, such as in the case of an emergency, into that sentence, I think I would be happy with that. The last thing on my list was just to clarify something that I think Ms. DeMeo said about the situation about educational exceptions. That my understanding of this is those are educational exceptions. They're still going to be going through this committee, still be voted on by the board. It's more of an exception of what happens to it after that, because, for instance, in a curriculum purchase decision, that's clearly within the board, the state mandate of the board to have those types of educational decisions. So that's it's not an exception to the board and the board process. It's more how it's going to be treated as the city is working with the board to be looking at these types of things. And so I'm correct in that, Ms. DeMeo?
Yes, that is correct.
To be honest, and that's because we are an agent of the state as well as part of New Haven. So it's kind of that balance. So I think that's a great progress there because there are some things where this might be able to help expedite some things when it's clearly something like a state mandated purchase of a curriculum, that kind of thing. Any other comments or questions related to this?
Yes, I have a question. Is there, and it's related to what triggers a change order. And my question is, what in our process greatly limits a contractor from intentionally underbidding a scope of services and then coming to us later when we need the work to be done to come back and charge more for it. One, I'm curious if that happens or, I'm hypothetical and I'm making it up. And two, if it does happen, what kind of prevents us from doing that? Because I can imagine people saying, okay, they don't have a lot of money, so I'm just going to underbid this and plan on submitting a charge that will trigger a change order request.
Well, I would, and I really don't know the history of it, but I would presume that that's why the change order committee has a 20% limit on change order, to put a cap on the ability to do that. But we all rely on the city purchasing department to police those matters. May not answer your question, but
it helps it's in the direction of an answer. Are there additional thoughts and wisdom and experience on this thing?
I think one data point on that would be that a next step for this policy itself is to go to governance committee and then to the board. The next step beyond that is there's been discussion of a workshop for the board, a public workshop that would go over how purchasing policies work and what protections and things are in place, what this change order committee does, and, you know, variety of things like that. So there will be a chance to talk to like the purchasing agent and learn about their procedures. I think one thing also is that if vendors show a history of stuff like this, my understanding is that something the purchasing agent could speak to is that it can be that a vendor becomes, we just won't do business with them any longer.
Yeah.
And if we saw patterns of this with the board, we might also not want to approve future contracts with a vendor. Attorney Alexiadis?
Yeah, yes, I mean, that's correct. However, it is dependent on the process that's being used for a particular vendor. Because, for example, I think that in general, it's difficult and rare to bar someone from bidding. And then the lowest qualified bidder then you're required to make that award. On an RFP, you've got much more discretion, and that's based on or an RFQ for that matter, based on the factors in for those decisions as noted in the RFP. So yeah, if we're awarding a contract based on an RFP, you do have much more discretion to avoid bad actors. If it's something that actually went out to a formal bid process, it's harder to do.
Thank you.
It's a long way of saying there is a debarment process for bidders, but I have not seen it applied. That doesn't mean it hasn't been applied, but I just haven't seen it applied.
Any other discussion on this item? And what's one clarifying question, Ms. Jackson? You said that the next governance committee meeting is in a week?
Is on the 26th, and then the one after that is December 10th.
Okay. So if we could, I'm comfortable voting on this evening. And I'm happy to make the motion to do so, but just to clarify, if we could, I would like when I send this to the committee, to the governance committee, to be able to include the list of people that have been working on this. So if I could have sometime in the next couple days, memo that says, briefly outlines, this is the process, and here's a list of people that have worked on it. I think that's informative, and I just think it's informative. So my goal would be able to send this to them by Thursday, or it would have to be posted Friday or Monday for their meeting. I'm trying to remember if it's Tuesday. If we could just have it like by Thursday.
It's on Tuesday.
Okay, so if we could have it by Thursday, Ms. DeMeo, if that's okay, or whoever will pull that together. I'd like to send it to them on Thursday afternoon to the committee leadership. And that'll also have time to update the briefly amended version to add in that clause in the sentence at the end of page 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Hearing nothing else on this, I move that we send to the governance committee policy draft for policy 3323 on procurement with as amended.
Second that motion.
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. And this was lots of work by lots of people, and I appreciate everybody's work on this. I think we had a pretty good policy before that Ms. DeMayo and Dr. Joyner were instrumental in, along with others, but those two especially. But now I think it's cleaned up, tightened up, and meets needs and things that have come up since then. So some progress. The final thing I think on our agenda is, now that we've done this policy, it's time to start looking at other policies. So I'm just going to briefly share something that, and we'll add it to the agenda for next meeting to talk about which ones we're going to have. But I just wanted to share my, you're able to see a spreadsheet, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are lists of policies, and we've already sent the things in green have already been gone to governance and gone to the board and been voted, posted on the website. There's a lot of things in orange, which I will also point out to governance committee leadership that there are some policies that we sent last year that kind of are in their pipeline, and if there's anything they need from us. There are some other policies to work on, one of which I think is the next big group would be transportation related. And so that's kind of the big section of stuff that hasn't been done yet. And so my recommendations are going to be that we maybe tackle some of those next. But there's just a few more that are still floating out there. Some are related to financial records, inventories, energy conservation, and but the big one with several policies connected is transportation related. Some of which are required and some of which are recommended. So, but we'll talk about that next time. Is there a motion to adjourn? Unless there's discussion on that item?
No, I look forward
So
to
moved.
those policies.
It's been moved.
Second.
Third. Did I hear you second, Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, I second.
Been moved and seconded. President Rivera?
Yes.
Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.